This is the Education Business Podcast for consultants and business owners providing services in schools. I'm Claire Riley, and I'll be sharing how to start, grow and scale your education business. Hi everyone, welcome to the Education Business Podcast. I have a guest with me today, and it is Karen Gibb from Mind Marvels. So Karen was a teacher, she became an entrepreneur, and so we're going to talk about the lessons that she's learned from being a teacher and then becoming a business owner. Karen, it's so great to chat to you again. And now we're not just remote anymore, we've actually met in person. So welcome to the Education Business Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me on. It's an absolute pleasure. And yes, we've met in person now, so we're real life. We know each other in real life.
Yeah, exactly. Real life. Karen actually came down all the way from Scotland to Halifax a couple of months ago. And I can't believe that you did that while expecting a baby. Like, oh my word, it's amazing.
But we were talking backstage, Claire, and you were like, I would do the same things. Like, when you've got that limited time frame, like, there's so much you want to pack in, right?
But do you know what? It's amazing that you recognise that as well, because I think in some ways, yes, you're right. But I also thought I could just carry on with my life the way it was in some ways, and that didn't work out.
No, I think I'm probably one of the last of my friends to have a baby now. So I think I'm now starting to realise that things will be different.
Yeah, you've got that good preparation, which is excellent.
Yeah, no pressure, eh?
The good thing about that is you can just be like, can you tell me exactly what I need to do? Because I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. And then all the kind of 3 a.m. feeds that I hear about, like you'll be up late at night and, interrupted sleep. So I'm bracing myself, enjoying life just now. I'm sure I'll enjoy it even more, but in a different way.
Yes, it's definitely a different thing. And not to get into the whole baby thing, but I think when you have your second one, you know what you let yourself in for. But the first one, you can't really describe what it's like.
Yeah, it'll definitely be a trying time. Probably a lot harder than starting a business, maybe.
Well, I think so, but that's my perspective, and I love business, and so you're probably going to be in the same boat as me. But on that note, let's actually, well done for that segue, by the way. Let's actually talk about business. So you were a teacher before, you've got a business now. I want to talk about all the different lessons that we've had really around being a teacher first, then going into business, because I think we think that it's harder for us as teachers. So how did that come about for you? How did you end up leaving teaching and starting a business?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I was actually away travelling in my 20s. So I went away for 4 years. I lived in Canada and Australia, and I travelled like all around kind of Asia, and I had a really great experience. And I came back. I'd finished my what we call the probation year of teaching before I'd left. So I was a qualified teacher when I left. And when I came back, I just didn't fit into a typical classroom. I felt really like, what do they call it? A square peg in a round hole.
Yeah.
Something like that. But I just felt, I just felt really squeezed, and I wasn't really sure how to get out of that situation, or how to really gain, I guess, career as a teacher. So what happened was I actually graduated as a politics teacher. We call it modern studies in Scotland. You guys don't really have an equivalent down south, but it's kind of modern history is what it is. So when I came back from travelling, I actually worked with children out of the SDN, or additional support needs, as we would say in Scotland. And then I worked in the social work department with children. So it was a really kind of varied job. I didn't ever actually use my degree in politics, which is interesting. So I did this for a couple of years, but I just couldn't fit in anywhere. And the more that I worked with children that had, additional needs, the more I realised how they needed to be in touch with their emotions to learn, how they needed to be be able to regulate their own emotions. And that kind of where Mind Marvels, my business, came around. So around 2016, 2017, I got really interested in mindfulness. So I just started researching it for my own self, and realised really quickly that a lot of the issues that I had in the world, where I would blame other people for decisions, were actually out of my control, and that was a huge relief to me. So around 2018 was when I really started Mind Marvels after doing a lot of courses and work, and that's where it developed. But Mind Marvels was really just me with a couple of post-it notes at the start, like as session plans. It wasn't anything like it is today. It was really just things just written down to make sense to myself. And that's where Mind Marvels was born.
Do you think, when I think back to my experience when I was a supply teacher and how the idea for Classroom Secrets came about, because I was on supply, I knew that it wasn't a long-term thing. And I actually think, even though I knew that it was the right thing, like I could feel it inside, this really strong sense that this would be so helpful for teachers and this was the right thing to do. I was looking for a way out of the classroom, I think, deep down, whether or not I had that on a conscious level, it was definitely subconscious. Do you feel like you were looking for a way out of the classroom?
Definitely, without a doubt. And I don't know if I could admit that to myself, because whenever I spoke to people, they would say, oh, teaching's great. You know, you get all these holidays a year, you get a great pension, everything that you hear that is the perks of teaching without really delving into the realities of teaching. But I think for me, yeah, I was very much like you. So I had a permanent job when I came back, and then I left that at the end of 2017. And then after that, I worked supply. So I had jobs in permanent schools, but it was always on supply. I could never commit to a full-time contract.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I thought, I just don't see my whole life being in a classroom. And that was quite difficult because all my family are teachers and lecturers and social workers. We're all very much in the caring profession. Not that I'm not in that now, but it's a totally different capacity when you're running your own business.
Yeah, it's you're taking away the safety aspect, aren't you? And I think that is really good, actually, from a teaching. If you're a teacher and you want to leave the classroom and set up a business, we do have supply as an option. And I know for many people that's not possible if you're really relying on your income. But if you can manage, it is a fantastic way to be able to say, okay, well, I've still got this income coming in. I can still do this thing and my other thing and not commit to it. And I think that's the important word you use there, commit. I didn't want it to be my whole thing because I knew I needed something else. So when you were in the classroom, did you start by doing some mindful things before you even went on supply, or is it something that you did as you were a supply teacher?
So I worked in a school for teenage boys that had behavioural issues. So you can imagine how some of the things that I tried went down with some of the boys. But I really tried to focus on myself first. I actually had never really done any sort of self-development. I didn't really understand it. I thought it was quite quirky and, that it wasn't for me. So the first kind of step was really working on myself and discovering like why I could feel this way and the patterns of my thinking. And that was really powerful to develop myself as a person. But then I started to develop sort of session plans, if you like, for Mind Marvels in the classroom. But when I went on supply, it meant that I could try and sample this with children who perhaps were a bit younger or maybe not the teenage boys that I was currently working with. So it kind of all happened organically, but now I think there probably wasn't that purpose. There probably wasn't, as much as I can look back and think, oh, that was great what I did. I don't know if I knew what I was doing at the time, if you get me. But like you said, I think that desire to leave the classroom made it why I got to where I am today.
But not just that, I think this desire to do this thing that you know is going to help people. Sometimes I think we think that we have to have it all planned out and that's what stops people. Yes, we need to plan. It's not that we shouldn't plan, but often we don't take the next opportunity. And all you did was take the next opportunity. And I did the same thing. I went on supply and I tried out some of the Classroom Secrets resources. I liked as a supply teacher when they didn't leave work and I could do something a little bit more fun. One of my favourite things to do was this coordinates picture. So you'd follow the instructions, do coordinates, and you'd end up creating pictures, and that had all the different levels because it was differentiated, because it was some secrets. And the kids loved that. And then I would be able to say, oh, hang on, that didn't work, or that was too long, and that kind of thing. So yeah, you can look back and go, oh, maybe it wasn't as planned as it should have been. But I just think it's about taking the next step, always being open to take the next opportunity and just giving it a go instead of having all of the reasons why you shouldn't do it. Because the people who have done it, us, we
Mhm.
didn't have that plan. We just did it.
That's a really good point, actually. As someone who's a chronic planner, like myself, it's a really good way to see that, like, our like background and our patterns and how we got to where we were. Perhaps it wasn't this great big plan after all, but maybe that's what made it work. If it had been a great big plan, maybe it wouldn't have worked. We would have put too much pressure on ourselves. We would have probably tried to be perfectionists about it.
I think as well, I'm doing some sessions in Education Business Club about 5-year planning. And if you're a startup, very difficult to come up with a 5-year plan because you want to make a 5-year plan on things that you know are possible. And if you're still figuring out if it's possible, it's very difficult. And so I wouldn't recommend doing a 5-year plan until you feel like you've really established in your role, that you know how to make it a full-time job, or at least you're getting there. So I think there are different stages, aren't there? It's not that you're not going to plan, but you have to be open to just taking the next step all of the time.
Yeah, definitely. And what is it they always say? It's like messy progress is still progress. So, like, you're not always going to make things right, or you're not always going to get things right. But actually, as long as you keep moving forward, you will get to where you need to be eventually.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit more about Mind Marvels. Like, how big is it now?
Great. So yeah, Mind Marvels really came into fruition probably officially 2019. So it was me that did everything. It was me that was spinning all the plates, as I'm sure you'll remember fondly from the early steps in Classroom Secrets. So yeah, really through COVID was when I started thinking, how can I not do so much of the work? Obviously we had that time where we weren't in school, so there was a lot of thinking time and preparation time, but really what I thought was, do I want to bring on staff? Do I want to have freelancers? Do I want to... And this is where this word franchise came in. I'd never really heard of a franchise before. I thought it was some sort of pyramid scheme, or only like big companies like McDonald's and Subway, they were the ones that did franchising. And franchising really appealed to me because what it meant was we could reach more children in all parts of the UK, but also it meant that people were as passionate as me about Mind Marvels and wanted to deliver it in their own area. So that's where franchising came in. It's essentially known as a business in a box, which is quite a cheesy phrase, but basically people buy into a franchise, they get a postcode or a territory area where they work, and that's their exclusive area, and then we in head office take a percentage of the turnover. And in return for that, they get ongoing training, support, resources, uniform, everything they basically need to start a business without having to start their own business from scratch. So that's what franchising is in a nutshell. But really seriously started thinking about it 2021. So now we have developed a franchise. It is a work in progress, as is everything.
Yeah.
We're discovering who our ideal franchisees are, who it's best suited for, and we're still learning. We're learning so much, and that'll never stop. The learning, definitely not.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm so pleased to hear you say that, because that's one of my mantras at the moment when it comes to turning your business from a job that you love into your business as an asset. It is not a 12-step course. I'm never going to go, oh, have this 12-week course, tick, 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 tick. It's a journey. You've got to come with me on the journey and I will help you happily. But it's not something that you're going to finish. And you've got to look for the big lessons and the small lessons and take action. And, you can't have in your mind that one day your business will be fixed. I used to
Mhm.
think that, and it's just not a thing. It is not a thing.
Definitely not. And I think for franchising, if anyone's considering it, the time that you need to spend, probably more so than starting a business, because you've got to get the legals right in the background. You've got to speak to franchise solicitors, because you're essentially giving away a piece of your business to somebody else and hoping, and you can do all the checks you like and you can do all the compliance, but at the end of the day, it's up to that person to make that successful business, with your help, of course. So there's loads of legals. We have an operations manual, which is like your business guidebook for everything to do with the business. And I always laugh when sort of new franchisors kind of are speaking with me and they're saying, "Oh, that's me finished the ops manual now." And I'm like, no, it's never finished, because you always get new things to add to it.
Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, we've had conversations before, haven't we? It's exactly the same as having a team.
Yeah.
Obviously, we don't have an ops manual in the same way, but we have all
Mhm.
the training, we have the way that we do things, and things change all the time.
Yeah.
And you always just have to be changing it. And I think it's a very similar thing. So it was COVID and it made you think differently. But what point did you think this has to be bigger than me? And what's driving that? What is it going to give you?
Well, funny you should say that. I think it was maybe the thought of having a family that actually was a driver, because I was thinking, how can Mind Marvel still run without me in it? And I think that's where a lot of business owners, myself included, do trip up. We are the pivotal part, we're the main piece in that jigsaw of our business. But actually, when you take us out, do we have a business without ourselves? And I didn't want to be always the person in the middle of that business. I want it to run so that I'm able to take time off, that I'm able to, have some sort of maternity leave, that I'm able to still be part of the business, but people can run it without me essentially being there. And I think that's really important, and that's where we kind of differentiate, isn't it, between a business and a job for ourselves.
Oh, absolutely. And it's so interesting that basically you brought up the whole family thing because that was the same for me. I had freelancers. So I started using freelancers and I was going through the IVF process. But then when I knew that, so I had like the first round and they needed to be frozen. And then I started employing people. And it was very slow burn and I still had more freelancers. But I was thinking, hang on a minute, how is this thing going to run? And so I would say in some ways that pushed me into thinking more like a business owner. So there might be quite a lot of people listening, particularly if you, the person who's physically having the baby, you might be thinking in that sense as well. Because, I think we're in a similar position. Your
Mhm.
partner's at home as well. You're going to
Yeah.
share that. And so, to be fair, I wasn't in that situation because Ed did have a job until a couple of months after my second baby was born. But when you've built this thing and you know that it's not worth just collapsing, you have to put the structures in place to make it something without you.
Definitely. And you can be as organised as you like, but the reality for me just now is that I do have freelancers now in my own area that run sessions for me, but sometimes things happen where they can't deliver the session. So you're still in the business. You might have to go out and deliver those sessions, to help out. So it's not that you're taking a step away from the business as such, but you're just becoming more of, what would you say, Claire? More of like I don't want to say like in the background, but do you know what I mean? It's like you're more
Well,
strategic, maybe.
you're more of an overseer, I think. You can oversee things happening, but you also are at a stage where you have to step in. And I think I thought that you got to a point where that stopped. I would say my recent experiences, sometimes you still have to do that. If there's an area where you have that knowledge and expertise, you need to be able to step back in. But you can be careful about how much you commit in that circumstance.
Wow. Hmm.
And I suppose you've probably done the same. What I did was think, like, what's the bulk of the things that I'm doing that other people could do because it's kind of a system, get that off my plate. But then there were other things that I was still thinking about. across all of the business, really. And I think if you've built your business where you have sessions or you have product, it's very easy to build that. So I see lots of tutoring businesses where they've got loads of tutors and they do everything else. Well, that was me. I did everything else and I had loads of freelancers creating resources. The hard bit is then that business bit of it. Do you get any help with that? Because the more you get, then the bigger that job becomes. Sometimes it's 3 people's jobs. And that can be tricky, I think, when you make the transition. But I suppose for me, it's making sure that everything you're doing that is like a routine, you're trying to not do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's letting people have that control as well, I think is important. Like stepping that giving that responsibility over to someone else, but letting go as well to a certain degree.
Yeah, and it's something I've been talking about a lot because it's such an interesting thing. You know, all the business books say, oh yeah, give over responsibility, give up control, let go. And really what I've learned over the last couple of years is not to give up control, to give
Mhm.
up responsibility, but not to
Yeah,
give up control. I think we got to a point where maybe we've given over too much control and then didn't have the control. But the business books don't tell you that. And that's so hard to navigate because you want to give people freedom. You want them to be able to push it, but also you need a handle on it as well. So that
yeah,
is such a tricky thing. And I don't think I haven't come up with a formula yet for that. It's more of a learning on the job kind of thing. Because I think sometimes you just can't mentor somebody on a specific thing like that.
yeah. And a lot of it can be intuition. Like if an email comes in, the person I have just now that controls the inbox, I've got to just trust to some degree that they're going to respond with the right thing. And if they don't respond with the right thing, it's like the learning from that. I put it into the SOPs, which is what you guys will have, the standard operating procedures. Every business should have SOPs. And I think that's because even if you're just a one person business, sometimes I forget to do things like or how to do them. And then I go and Google them and I'm like, oh, why don't I just put this in my manual for myself?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And even just now, there's been something that happened over the last few days. And I'm like, okay, I expected this thing to happen, but it hasn't happened. And in the
Mhm.
past, I might have just thought, oh, okay, well, I'll see if it happens again. But I'm just going to say, listen, I thought this was going to happen. It didn't happen. So how are we going to make sure that this does happen and we don't fall down on this again? And it's just about being open, honest, being able to have a conversation without anyone being offended and that kind of thing. And I think as teachers, that's what can be at top of our mind first, where we're too worried about offending people or upsetting them. But, as a business owner, you are allowed to ask for a certain standard in exchange for the reward of pay. And that can be a
Definitely.
hard lesson to learn. In the beginning, we think, oh, well, maybe we shouldn't ask them and we don't want to upset them. Or we just accept this lower standard than we should do.
Mhm. And it's hard. It's really hard to give those controls or to say to someone, especially if they are a bit older or if they've got more experience in a certain field. You might feel a bit, oh, I don't know how to broach this. But I think just being human about it and just speaking with kindness just helps massively, and stops the sort of the resentment that could build up otherwise.
Absolutely. And it's also about personalities, but also personal growth. And sometimes as entrepreneurs, we've had to do a lot of personal growth, and the people working with us could be older and have not done that. And then that
Mhm.
makes it difficult because, yes, there might be an older person, but in terms of spiritual maturity, then you could be leaps and bounds ahead, and that could be difficult. And also, that self awareness of what we're actually good at and what we really do know instead of deferring that to somebody else because we think they might have more experience or more knowledge or the older. It's just keeping that balance, which can be quite difficult, like hiring great people and letting them get on with it, but also not forgetting why you're great as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's where like your vision, your mission, your values, your purpose all come in. If you don't have them for your business, it's probably a great time to look at them, because anything that I do now, I try and align it to sort of our values and just make sure that it's in line with those. Because if it is, then you know you're on the right path, aren't you? You're doing kind of what you set out to do to start with. But just sort of leading back to the franchising, I know we kind of went off there, but I think that's really good to go off on there, because it shows you kind of how hard it can be to choose what's right for your business. I think with franchising, when a franchisee, so the franchisee is the person that buys into the business. I'm the franchisor, the person, I don't want to say at the top, but the person that invented the business, if you like. Um, when the franchisee asks a question, I'll usually always refer them to the operations manual. And now with people working for me in the office, I also refer them to the SOPs manual, the standard operating procedures. And that's not out of rudeness, but it's more because I know that if they start training themselves to search there, less questions come to us because it's already built in the system. And sometimes they come up with a great question that I've got no idea what the answer is. And I say, I'll just come back to you. I'll have a think about it. I'll put it in the ops manual. I'll send them the link, and then they have it there. So it's another great way of kind of taking yourself a little bit out of the business. You're not asked so many questions as well.
I love that you brought that up, because I've actually trained my team members before to do that with other people. So, for example, we had a proofreading role, and it might be that a resource creator would ask the proofreader questions that they probably already know the answer to, but because they're worried about it. And so I've been through a process of training those proofreaders to say, hang on a minute, here is the answer, go find the answer here. And it really worked. So it's such an interesting thing, because you're obviously putting that in place now. If you don't franchise and you just, have a business like I do, and you employ people and have freelancers, then it's such a similar thing. You'll do it at your level, but then as you grow the team, then you have to train other people to do the same thing as you as well, and not make the same mistake. And otherwise you still get that asking loads of questions that we already know the answers to, just because then we don't have to be responsible for the decision, because that's usually where it comes from. So I love that you brought that up. So what do you feel like has been your biggest lesson moving from teaching into business?
Good question. I am the decision maker. So, I would go to school before, sometimes just roll out of bed at the last moment, go in, do my job. I love working with the kids, don't get me wrong, but go in, probably do the bare minimum, because I wasn't that happy actually doing the teaching, the admin side of things. But I would still get paid. Now that's totally different as a business owner. And I'm not saying every day is 100%, you're like on it, but you've got to find that motivation to move that business forward. Like if I was still sitting here myself doing the Mind Marvel sessions, if I was happy doing that, absolutely fine. But I always could foresee a bigger future for Mind Marvels. I just wasn't sure how or when or what that might have looked like at the time. But I think for me, you've got to be open to growth, to change, to development, and to move your business forward. I think that goes back to what we said before about progress. Like you've got to put those little steps in, because at the end of the day, it's not a job, and it might be for some people, and that's okay. But for me, I didn't want it to be a job where it was just me that was in the business. So I think, yeah, it's moving out of that cushy pay slip, isn't it? And then being on your own, it's terrifying. It's so rewarding.
Yeah, it is terrifying. I think a lot of people that I talk to, they have the full-time job, and they probably really do know what they need to do to get the freelancers or get the people, but they're holding themselves back because they think there's something they don't know. Have you got any tips for that person who's still a solopreneur, who needs to start growing the business by getting some help? What would you say to them?
I think if they're still a teacher and they can do supply, like supply for me, and I think supply for you was pivotal in like starting our businesses. I don't think I could have done this without burning myself out 5 days a week in a permanent teaching job.
Mm.
So I think if the option is to go and supply, absolutely, just to give yourself a little bit of headspace, or just even I don't know what it's like so much in England, but in Scotland, depending on the type of supply, you don't need to do like parents' night and things. If it's short term supply, you've got a bit more freedom. But I think, like we've always said, it's just having a little bit of a plan. It doesn't need to be a 5 year plan, but just where do you want to take the business in the next, so many months? What can you do to get there? Like I see so many people paralysed when they run their own business or start their own business. Like that fear takes over. And the fear's designed to protect you. Like there's no doubt about it. But where are we when we're in that little bubble of protection? It doesn't allow us to grow. So I think sometimes you have to be a bit brave and a bit courageous to put that leap out there and to help yourself.
Yeah. It's interesting you use the word courage there, because I think that's what it is, isn't it? You've built this business to be this full-time job, you're turning down this work, and you know you need to take the step, and you probably know 80% of what actually needs to be done,
Yeah.
but really you need to tap into your courage and actually do it. And understand as well that, like, you can listen to all of my training, you can talk to loads of people who have employed people or taken freelancers on, but you can only get to 80%. That last 20% is still going to be trial and error. And I know you'll have experienced that yourself as well. You take
Yeah.
someone on and you think it's right. And sometimes you have to go through that process to be really clear about what you do want, because it's really hard to
Yeah.
actually know that thing in the beginning when
Yeah.
you're the only person who's done it. And so really, I suppose it's just having the courage to just do it anyway.
Yeah, and you're going to get it wrong. That's what's important to remember as well. Like I've made so many mistakes, and those mistakes have got me to where I am today. And I think when we think, we've brought people on that haven't been right for the business, and or you thought someone was going to be really great, and it's not worked out the way you thought it would. But the growth and the changes that you can make from those moments are huge. They're huge, and they'll help your business and yourself grow as a person too.
That's it, because you can't always make decisions if you haven't made the mistakes or had the experiences. And so I think you have to do that. And also, we talk about taking people on, maybe they're not right for the business. Sometimes people are right for the business for a certain amount of time, and
Mhm.
then maybe not right for the business after that. And that's all normal. I've experienced all that. Sometimes you did take the wrong person on in the first place, but the learning that you go through, through that process, depending on how you deal with it, is essential. And I think, we've got really quite good at hiring, to be honest. Sometimes
Mhm.
it doesn't work out that way, but we only got that good by making mistakes at the end of the
Yeah,
day, and
yeah,
realizing, every time we have somebody leaves, we actually look at that as an opportunity to look at that role and say, do we need it to be like that now? Or does it
mhm,
need to be something different based on what we've learned? So I think you're absolutely right.
mhm. And that's great to learn from that as well. Like if you have like an exit interview with someone, or just get a bit of feedback, or just reflect on that role, then you're not constantly having to you're not doing the same thing over and over again, are you? It's like you're adapting and seeing if that actually fits the business now. Like, and that's forward thinking for a business as well.
Talking about exit interviews, just before we close, I'm interested to know what your thoughts are, or what wisdom you can impart to listeners about not taking things personally. Because an exit interview can be quite brutal in
Yeah.
in those areas, based on what somebody perceives, because it's all about perception. So how do you not take things so personally?
Still learning on that one, to be honest.
Yeah, just do it
Uh,
anyway, even though you know it's gonna be really hard.
yeah, I think it's because it's so personal to that person that it becomes personal to you. And obviously you want everyone that comes into your business to grow, to thrive, to, in my case, like make money as successful business owners, but that doesn't always happen, and you can give everything to everyone and it's still not enough because people have their own challenges going on, they have their own personal circumstances. And like you said before, if they've not done that work on their own self-development, then like I was saying earlier, when I was in teaching, I would blame everyone else for everything without looking inward. And sometimes you can see that reflection from other people that feel anger or shame or guilt. And a lot of these emotions, although they're directed at you, I don't actually think it's that personal to us as people. It's just that we're that outlet where maybe they feel safe to let that go and to voice their opinions. So it doesn't, I don't know if it does get easier. Maybe it does for you, Claire, but maybe it will get easier for me. I think I always feel that personally, but I think it's just knowing that you did your best, I think, as a leader is what makes me sleep at night. When you put coaching and goal setting and things in place for, in my case, staff and franchisees, then you know that you've done all you possibly can. And sometimes that's not enough, and that's okay as well.
Yeah, you know what, you described that so beautifully actually, and very carefully, so well done. I think it does get easier, and
Mm.
and if I were to reflect on why, I would say it would be me growing as a person more and understanding the difference between what is my responsibility and what isn't. I think when we're quite new in business or we've just started taking on a team, we have not grown as much because we haven't been exposed to all of the things that we're going to get exposed to. And it is more personal because maybe we've got more of a relationship with that person. But as
Yeah.
time goes on, as long as you do the work on yourself to understand what you're not responsible for, because I had to do a massive piece of work on this and it was years in the making. And I'm still working on it now, just reminding yourself of things that you're not responsible for. Like you can be held responsible for so much. And just as you've said, you're doing this work on yourself because you've got no choice, but not everybody is doing that. And sometimes I think it's kind of like being a politician in some ways that you have to try and think about both sides of the coin, but the person who's in front of you is not going to think about your circumstances. They're only thinking about their own. And you
Yeah.
have to think about your own personal circumstances, the business as a whole. You have to think about this colleague and that colleague and all these other colleagues. You're thinking about everything. And that can feel frustrating because what you really want is for the person in front of you to understand what you can see. But
Mhm.
I suppose part of the growth piece and not taking it personally is knowing that that's never going to happen. And
Yeah.
kind of have to take yourself to this place of separation where you understand that you know everything and they don't, not from a place of superiority, but a place of being able to understand it. It's almost like you can see the invisible parts that other
Mhm.
people can't see. And so it gets easier, but it's still, it still tugs a little bit.
Definitely, definitely. But hey, it's all growing and learning, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I suppose part of the fear of creating your business as an asset is opening yourself up to this emotional roller coaster because that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you've just got to go and do it. If that's what you want to do, I think you can read as many books as you want, but until you have that first hurdle in your real life business, it's like that's when the growth really, really does start.
Yeah, yeah. What a great sentence to end on, Karen. Thank you so much.
I'd trained myself to say that. No, I didn't.
You had it written down there. Just say this. Claire, you've kept me for too long now. I want to finish the episode.
Not at all. No, thank you very much for having me on, and hopefully we've inspired a few people just to kind of think about their business, maybe, mid to long term in some capacity.
Yeah, super. Thank you so much. I think it's been such a great chat and I love talking about actually growing your business as this thing that is going to
Yeah.
give you something back one day. So well done for taking that step as well.
Thank you.
I really hope you enjoyed that chat and you took from it some really interesting learning. I think when I'm talking to people, more definitely comes out, and there's a good reason why you should have a mentor, by the way. And if you are interested in any kind of mentorship, then you can join Education Business Club. We would absolutely love to have you there. There's loads of content in there that will help you build more value in your business. You've also got the live sessions. And so if you're interested in joining, you will find the link to join in the show notes. And I'm going to see you for a solo episode next week. Thank you for listening to the Education Business Podcast. To get more information to grow your business, sign up at educationbusinessclub.co.uk.